Hello, and thank you for coming to cook with me in my kitchen tonight. I'm very excited that we're making sushi tonight. And sunshine, I knew I was going to do that. Sunshine sushi. It's a bit hard to say. Try and say that 3 times fast. That's a good one for the kids. Now, why are we making sushi? And I think it's personally one of my favorite meals, especially for busy households and especially for kids' lunch boxes. One of my absolute favorites. So the reason why we're making sushi is because I want to show you how easy it is and how simple it can be in a busy household, like I was saying. This is a common meal that I would use as a replacement for sandwiches in a lunchbox because it can be prepared the morning of. Now I know some people, those of you that maybe have never made sushi before, you might not believe me and go, are you kidding me? You cannot prepare sushi in a busy morning before school, but I promise you it's very possible. I'm going to show you how easy it is today with a little bit of prep work in advance. So, going to make that sushi, going to try and show you how to make it easy. We're going to do a couple of key pieces of the sushi today and save others for a future one as well because there's so much we can do just within the world of sushi rolls. I'm also going to admit off the start that I'm probably going to commit blasphemy in terms of the traditional Japanese way of doing sushi. So my apologies in advance if ever I insult a traditional culture method. The purpose of doing this sushi is to, like I said, make it available and accessible in your home. And for that, I'm totally open to bending rules in general, as I'm sure you will learn, for the purpose of practicality and for the purpose of use. So from that perspective, what we're doing today may not be traditional. Actually, in fact, it isn't. We're adding turmeric to the rice. Not traditional. But for the purpose of making it yellow, making it a little bit more exciting for the kids to get into, that's why we're going to do it. So sunshine sushi, the purpose of this is to bring some sunshine into your life, get a bit of color. We're focusing on the color yellow in this particular recipe. But if you happen to not be able to find yellow carrots, I completely get it. I couldn't either. So we're using orange carrots, still kind of bright and sunshiny. And also we found out that the ghee that I'm using for the pan is sol ghee, which happens to stand for the sun, which was kind of cool. And we're on the Sunshine Coast. So anyways, sunshine sushi. Now, if the kids are available and they can come help you, there's things that they can be doing here. And in particular, I want to show you how easy it is to roll the sushi without a sushi mat. So don't freak out if you don't have a sushi mat. I never use one. Blasphemy, I'm sorry. Okay, so let's begin. Give me a thumbs up if you are ready to go. And if you have any questions, please type them in as we go. I'm just going to take specific breaks to answer those questions. If it's really urgent, you'll have to give me lots of little face signs, so hopefully I'll catch it on the side of my eye. Okay, let's get into it. So first things first, we need to make sure your rice is already happening. Now, if it isn't already happening or you're a little bit behind on that, that's all right. You'll just have to watch first and then catch up on the rice element. The good news is once we get everything ready for sushi, that's pretty much what sushi is it's all a bunch of prep. And then at the very end, we can do all the assembly at the very end. So don't fret if you haven't got the rice finished just yet, but that is the next step. Then we're going to be making the Japanese omelet. Now, again, this is not a super traditional form of the omelet. The very traditional form, they keep wrapping the omelet on itself as they add more egg. I'm going to do the simple version where we're just going to create a simple plain layer omelet and then we're going to cut it into strips instead at the end. So we're going to make that. Then we'll cut up all of our ingredients, roll the sushi, and then if you'd like, at the end, I'm going to do a bonus demo to do a homemade mayonnaise because I realized that as far as a special dip goes for the sushi or something that you'd like to add a bit more flavor into the roll, I like to use a homemade mayonnaise, and you can add things like your hot sauce or any other flavorings that you want to it. And the other use for the mayonnaise is if you're going to do a tuna layer or a salmon layer from tin tuna or tin salmon. So that's something that you can use that mayonnaise to basically soften and make a little bit more palatable inside the roll. All right, so let's get into the rice. Come on over. Now, I've done up a large batch of the rice here, so this is a bit larger than what I've shown you, but we do have a bit of sunshine color coming through. You may have noticed when you put the turmeric in that it doesn't look like a lot, but by the time the turmeric heats, we get this beautiful bright color that comes out. So that's why we wanted to put it in while it's cooking. Okay, so this rice is looking pretty done to me. We've got a nice little bit of stick happening there, even though this is a brown rice. So you do not need, and I repeat, again I'm committing blasphemy, you do not need sushi rice to create sticky sushi that works. So please use the rice of choice for you. And in my case, I want to use the rice that's going to contribute the most nutrition, the most beneficial value. So this is actually an Australian grown biodynamic rice, and it's a brown rice. So we still have all the benefit in the husk of the rice. So once the rice is cooked, we really want to chill it off as soon as we can so that we can get these rolls happening. So I like to spread it out on a big plate, maybe a big platter if you have one, and get some air into it. And then that also is going to allow us to give it a good sprinkle with some rice vinegar as well. So again, a little bit contrary to tradition, I'm not going to be using sushi vinegar. And the reason for that is most sushi vinegars are very full of sugar, and I just want to reduce that. So we're going to be using just a plain rice vinegar. Okay, and we can just, there's not a technical measurement on this. So basically we just want a little sprinkle. Overall it might be 1 or 2 teaspoons in a batch about this size, but I just love it for flavor. All right, so we're gonna let that cool, give it some air, give it a bit of space. If you'd like, you could even put it in the fridge. I'm gonna just let that cool off here while we do some other cooking. There, easy, bright yellow rice, hopefully a bit of a novelty for the kids. If you wanted to do red rice, I would suggest getting yourself some beetroot powder, and then you can do red rice. You could even just grate a little bit of fresh beetroot into the rice when it's cooking, and you'll get it kind of actually be more pink than red. What other colors could you manage? Green, you could easily do a green rice. I don't know if that would go over with the kids unless it was St. Patrick's Day. But my point is here, you can have fun and you can make it something that the kids want to get into. All right, so the Japanese omelet. Now, just making sure everyone's with me so far. If you don't have the rice done already, like I said, super simple in that sense. We'll just let it continue cooking. The absorption method, if that's new to everyone, I'll just quickly go over that one because that, honestly, perfect rice every time. I have a lot of people that do come to me and say, you know, I'm quite happy with cooking rice in my rice cooker, and that's okay. I have some people say that the one finger method is how they measure the water, and it works every time. That's good as long as you use the same pot and the same amount of rice. That generally works all right. The only thing I'll say is the absorption method, if you can practice and learn that one, that then applies to all the other forms of grains. So your buckwheat, I've even made sushi from buckwheat. It works beautifully because buckwheat has a natural stickiness to it when it cooks with the absorption method. So there's buckwheat you can use, you can do that with millet, you can do it with quinoa, even amaranth you can put in and make these alternative form sushis with these grains as well in the exact same method. So to do the absorption method, again, you've probably already gone through this process and it's fully outlined in your recipe, but the idea is we put the right amount or the measured amount of soaked grain, ideally, in with a measured amount of water. The lid goes on the pot, it goes up to high temperature, full heat, till it reaches a boil. And as soon as it reaches a boil, we leave the lid on, do not move that lid, and turn it right down to the lowest possible heat until everything has absorbed and fully cooked through. It's so easy, and the number of people that I hear are these wonderful cooks, except they say to me, yeah, but I can't cook rice. So anyways, absorption method is that technique. Moving on to the Japanese omelet. Again, this is also very simple and straightforward, but I'd like to show you the key principles to get the omelet to be nice and fluffy, and also to cook through so that we have it evenly, I guess, cooked such that we can make strips out of it and it'll hold in the omelet. Okay, so we're going to use 4 eggs for this one. So if we haven't already got those out, let's get out the 4 eggs, crack them into a bowl. And then it calls for 2 teaspoons of rice vinegar and 2 teaspoons of coconut sugar. Now the coconut sugar is completely optional. This is a nice little trick here, by the way. I'm going to interrupt myself here. If you do get a shell in, it's much easier to get the shell out with another shell than with your finger. So nice little trick. Anyway, so 2 teaspoons of rice vinegar and 2 teaspoons of coconut sugar. The coconut sugar is completely optional, but as far as bringing across that kind of more traditional flavor in the sushi, it is a little bit important because I've actually toned down the amount of sugar called for in the recipe compared to true tradition, as they tend to serve it nice and sweet, almost like a dessert, I guess, in a sushi roll. So I'm just going to do 2 teaspoons coconut sugar, 2 teaspoons of the rice vinegar, and while that's happening, I'm going to preheat the pan. So if you have a choice of frying pan sizes, we don't want your largest one, but something around this size, a little bit bigger, is probably a good idea. And so I'm just going to preheat that one. Let that get nice and warm. And then you will be needing a lid. So that might be the determining factor as to which pot you're going to use. If you don't have a frying pan with a lid, you can use your largest pot with a lid. And so long as you heat the pot up really well first, then add some ghee or some third press coconut oil, which are your safe high heat frying oils. Then we turn the heat down and then we use it from there. Then you won't have the egg stick to the bottom. That's how we create a non-stick surface on a pan that isn't sprayed with a non-stick coating, basically. All right, so let's whisk that up. Get yourself a fork or a whisk. And then it's a little trick which is not absolutely necessary, but even a teaspoon of water into this will help us make the omelette a little bit fluffier than without it. So that little bit of water is going to create the extra steam that we want to give the fluff to it. It's a bit of a, I guess you could say, a magic trick if it can't necessarily 100% be explained, but I suppose science would have an answer for that. And then, so we're still heating up the pan. We're not quite there yet. So I'm going to use ghee. Definitely if you're dairy-free, you'd want to go with a third press coconut oil. That can also be referred to as deodorized coconut oil, or it just won't be labeled. It'll say cooking coconut oil instead of extra virgin or virgin. So the first press is extra virgin, the second press is virgin, the third press is what's safe at the high frying pan heat. All right. So the first 2 coconut oils I definitely use, but not in a frying pan. So I'll use them in all of my, raw treats and bliss bowls and everything else that I can get away with it, and I love it. But in the frying pan, we want to use the third press. All right, so once we've got a bit of heat in the pan, ideally we want the egg to really kind of sizzle on contact with the pan, and that's going to, again, make it easier for us to get it out of the pan when it's done cooking. So that's really the trick that we're looking for there. So we just need the pan to be hot enough to achieve that with. So bear with me on that note. This is going to be a great time for you to put any questions through, if you've got any questions up to this point, or if you have any, I guess, questions on what you think would be a different substitution that you need to make in the recipe. So definitely feel free to type those to me now, or just let me know that you're cooking along or who's joining you in the kitchen. We'd love to hear all of that as we let that heat up. Good to see, oh cool, great to see you guys cooking along with us. And if there's any other ingredients that you're not sure if you would put in sushi, please ask, because obviously for the sake of this recipe, I've tried to keep it simple. There are many other ingredients I would love to put in sushi, but we'll do that one at a time. I had to tame myself. If there's other things you wanted to include other than what we have here tonight or what you have seen on the recipe, you could be putting in some sauerkraut, and believe me, that tastes delicious. Or if you make your own cultured veggies, some pickled beans are delicious in that. You even may want to just blanch some asparagus and put them in as well. So if everyone's all going okay there, we should have the pan hot enough now. See, we're getting a little bit of smoke there. So I'm going to turn that right down, knowing that I've got enough heat here. Bear with me 1 second. And then, like I said, we do want a bit of sizzle. And then as soon as we put it into the pan, we would like to put the lid on so that we steam cook it rather than fry it. Perfect. Okay. So I've turned that right down. I'm going to leave it at about 4. And the trick now is to let it steam cook. And in that process, because we have the lid on, we're actually going to get a fluffy egg as opposed to a really flat kind of egg that might not be cooked on the top but will be overcooked on the bottom. So that's really the trick with the Japanese egg, is we want to steam cook it. That's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. If you were making a larger batch, you could use more eggs and double the recipe that we just did, use a bigger pan or use 2 pans. The key is we want to get the right thickness in the omelette so that we can cut it and put it into the wraps, but super simple. All right, so moving on from there, one thing I was going to say that you can do onto the rice just while it's cooling, and again, this is completely just a decorative aesthetic thing, again, maybe a bit more fun for the kids, is you may want to sprinkle a bit of sesame seeds on your rice so that that gets all mixed into the sushi when we do it. So I just saw them there now, so I'm just going to give a little sprinkle of sesame seeds onto the rice. If they were toasted, that would be even yummier. And because I've got black seeds, that's just going to make it a little bit more interesting. They're not super sunshiny, but we'll call them all the little eyes that they draw in the sunshine faces. That's all little eyes. There we go. All right, so while the egg is finishing doing its thing, let's get out the ingredients for the fillings. So if you've got your yellow capsicum, your carrot, your cucumber and avocado, let's get them out and get them happening into the sushi. All right, now the trick for sushi is long skinny strips. So in order to do that, you're either going to be wanting a nice sharp knife, or in some cases we can get away with a julienne peeler. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. Okay. So I like to just take the top out of the capsicum, and then we are going to use a knife for the capsicum, but we're going to use this little contraption called a julienne peeler for the carrot and potentially the cucumber, but mostly for the carrot because it's kind of the tougher item. So when it comes to long skinny slices, we just want to get the most benefit out of the size of the capsicum, and we're not going to cut it any shorter than that, but we want nice skinny slices so that we can line it all up in line and roll it into the roll. If you were being really pedantic and you wanted to, not pedantic I guess, but particular about how it looked at the end, you could possibly trim off the edges that curl up, but honestly they can get flattened out into the roll pretty easily, so I wouldn't bother about that. Let's keep it really straightforward. Now, if you were doing this in the morning before school, how would you make that happen? So the way that I've done that in the past, when I was cooking for kids, 4 kids at once, lunch boxes, breakfast, everything out the door, is we would make sure that the rice is ready the day before and that that's in the fridge. And then we would have some of these things cut up already or just prepared. So for example, the kids really loved avocado, cucumber, and tuna in their sushi wraps. So I would make sure that the avocado mixture was done and ready in the fridge, the rice was made, and everything else was easy to chop up the cucumber and the avocado on the morning of, roll it up in the lunch, done. Okay, so I'm going to show you what this is doing now because this is all nice and cooked for us. Oh, everything except a little bit on top. So see how we still have a little bit of liquid on here? A couple of things. We can cheat a little bit and drop that liquid under to where it's going to cook faster. Or we're going to put the lid back on and properly let it finish cooking. It's probably a bit of a better way. But we're very close. And see how fluffy that was looking? Yum, can't wait. Okay, so same goes with the cucumber. Now, funny enough, the way they sell cucumbers in the stores nowadays is no bigger than about that usually, which is the perfect length for the sushi wrap. So now we just want to do thin slices. So you may just want to have a look here. As far as thickness goes, if you really want to see the cucumber and see the nice perfect squares, we might want to go as thick as about 5 millimeters on our slice here. If you need to stabilize, you can. And then we're going to keep them into kind of square pieces throughout. So if you can imagine, when you bite into the roll, if that's too big for you, then we're going to cut it down the middle again. So it's entirely up to how you want to see that in the wrap. But obviously in the case of kids' lunchboxes, I tend not to worry too much, and they're just happy to eat it. All right. There we go. So we've got our strips of cucumber. When it comes to the carrot, the julienne peeler is probably going to be your easiest bet, because we can get the long skinny strips that are thin enough to not feel like you're biting into carrot, like a big chunk of carrot every time you bite into the sushi wrap, but at the same time still provide that delicious sweet benefit of the carrot and the bright sunshiny color. So this is probably one of my favorite little contraptions in the kitchen, and I would recommend getting a metal one. I think they're about $14 or $15 here, so not much, but it's a great thing to have on hand, even if you only use it for carrot. All right, so right down to the little knobby bit there. And the cool thing with doing the julienne and the carrot is it exposes the middle of the carrot, which is the sweetest part. So it looks a bit funny and the kids have a good laugh, but that's the yummiest bit, so you can let them nibble on that one. Okay. We have got all of our, yum, look at how puffy that one is. So that's what we're looking for right there, all that depth to the egg. And we're just going to let that cool a little bit so that we can cut it into strips and put that into our sushi. So if you were to look at the thickness of it, because we prepared the pan so nicely, this is going to just fall out of the pan for us, which is exactly what we want to have happen. So we're going to loosen that just enough to get under it. There we go. And I'm going to flip this onto a plate. So we can let it finish cooling and then cut it into strips. There we go. And because it's going to cool faster if I cut it first, let's do that now. So again, we just want long skinny strips that we can roll into the sushi rolls. It will flatten as it cools, but that's going to taste delicious. And for some kids, this is actually the difference between loving the sushi roll and not really being that interested in all the veggie bits, especially with that little bit of sweetness from the coconut sugar. For some kids, that's all it takes. So whatever works in that sense. All right, now the avocado is our second last step before we get to do some rolling. And then afterwards, we're going to do the mayonnaise as well. So a little trick with the avocado is to cut it while it's still in the avocado. So you might want to take a knife, preferably you've got a round-ended knife so it doesn't go straight through the skin, and we just cut our strips. If there's a little knobby bits in the avocado, it's going to jump on those, but just cut it into little strips within the skin. Okay, and then we can take a spoon and scoop it out. Now I did feel that, like I said, this avocado's been bitten, so there's going to be a few little hard bits underneath, and this is not going to work super ideal. Avocados can be very hit and miss, but we'll try to get under all that. There's lots of knobby bits in here, and get out whatever we can from it. And then I flip it over and take out any of the other, I guess, do you know the little hard bits that get in there? That's actually from bugs biting the skin. And then the avocado, as a form of protection, actually forms that little hard kind of nodule around the bite, so it protects the avocado. But that's all still very, very edible and delicious, so don't waste that bit. We just had to get rid of the little nodules. And maybe this half will be better. Sometimes it's half and half. That's all right. Avocados are such a treat, I don't mind. Okay. Now, another little trick, it's particularly applying to lunchboxes actually, is if your son or daughter would like to have avocado in their lunch, but it tends to go, I guess, off color or brown, you can do that slicing trick for them. Leave it in the skin though, don't necessarily take it out, but then squeeze the lemon juice or some lime juice over. And as you squeeze it, just kind of massage the skin with the avocado in it and let all the juice go between the cracks. And they should have it still delicious by lunchtime, so without having all the browning. All right, so there's our avocado. And how's everyone going? Please let me know if you need me to slow down or speed up, or you have questions. Because we are nearly ready to roll. Now, I don't think my rice will be fully cooled yet, so the only qualification I'll say on that is if that happens, you probably just want to be able to chill the rolls in the fridge after they're rolled. If the rice is too hot when we put it in, it'll make the sushi wrapper go soft and soggy, basically. So to prevent that, we just need to make sure that the rice is cool enough. You'll know after you do one or two whether or not that's the case. Okay, now, similar to when we make lasagna or something like that, you benefit from a little bit more preparation so that you have a shorter time in the making. And this is, I guess, just called organization. So what I mean by that is if we get everything out, get everything ready, and get our assembly line pretty much happening, then it's really not a big drama at all to pump out even double this amount of sushi. So I like to take all the seaweed out of the package, so it's ready to grab. Okay, a couple other things you can do to get yourself organized. We're going to need a little bowl of water. Well, you don't need one, but access to water at the tap. I like to have a little bowl of water on hand. This is going to be to wet our fingers to seal the edges of the sushi. The other thing you may want to have on hand is just room or a place to put the rolls once they're done. You may want to put them into a container to put in the fridge later on to chill before you cut them, or just onto a plate. So somewhere to put the rolls. And what else? You might need a piece of paper towel just to clean your fingers after handling something sticky like the avocado. Other things you may want to include would be something like cream cheese or the smoked salmon. Now, I haven't got any of the smoked salmon here tonight, but if you're doing the smoked salmon, same thing goes. We're just going to be applying it in strips as we do the rolls. All right, so if everyone's good to go, we are going to get these wraps happening. And I'm going to show you how easy it is because you do not need a proper sushi mat to roll them on. You can do it straight on the bench top, otherwise on a plate, on a cutting board, whatever's easier for you. So we want to have the lines. I don't know if you can see that in the glare, but there's lines that run through the sushi paper. These ones are running this way. So we want the lines to run in line with our body, I guess, if you can say. So away from us. And that's because when we roll it, those lines are meant to be the cut lines. It's really not such a big deal because we're not going to cut directly on them. However, if you roll it in this way, it may have the tendency for it to break apart as a roll. So you roll as if the lines are your cut lines. You can think of it like that. Okay, I'm just going to grab the rice. So you can do the same. Let's get yourself properly set up. And we can just test the rice and make sure that, yeah, that's pretty good. There's a little bit of warmth still in it, but for the most part, that is a great temperature to do. Perfect. Okay, and we've got our nice little speckled, kind of looks like salt and pepper there of the colored sesame seeds. So now, a couple of tricks, and this is the stuff worth noting. Don't overdo the rice. It's going to make for a very difficult roll and something that's going to be kind of overly filling before you actually get all the benefit of the actual fillings, not the rice, if that makes sense. So we don't want to overdo it. So the idea here is we're going to fill this 3/4 of the sushi mat. Even if you could do 2/3, that would be even better than 3/4. So the edge closest to you, we want to bring the rice to, and right to the edges on the sides, so that you don't get that caving in effect of the outermost sushi rolls. So that's about as simple as it needs to be, or as complicated as it needs to be. That's good. We're going to call that absolutely fine. Some of the mistakes, not mistakes, I guess, things I see in people that are brand new to it, they might have this rice twice as thick, and then they'll actually mash it down so that it looks sticky. It's not very nice to bite into if you do that. So we want to keep, even if there's little pockets that you can see through, that's absolutely okay, because by the time we roll it, it'll all come together. So the idea here is don't overcrowd the rice. Next, we're going to lay in some ingredients, and less is more. So we're going to do a couple of strips, and I'm building it on the 1/4 line. So if this is 0, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, I'm building my strip of ingredients on the 1/4 line. Now you can stick out the fancier ends, stick them out of the ends if you want them to have a bit of a decoration. And it doesn't so much matter if you've got some overlap here, because we're going to make up for it in other ingredients. So we put the pretty ends out the end, and then fill in the middles. Okay, see, I'm already putting in too many toppings. This is the tendency. So let's do a couple of carrot bits. String that in there, stick some at the end. Now, I should have said too, when it comes to carrots, some carrots will oxidize worse than others. So you can see how that's starting to turn color there and oxidize. It's mostly the skin layers that will do that. If you want to prevent that, just either, if you're so organized as to have a little spray bottle in your fridge of lemon juice, then we would give a little spray to the julienned carrots once they're cut. Otherwise, you can just squish a bit of lemon and kind of rub it all over the carrot to prevent that from happening. Just an aesthetic thing though, it's still perfectly fine to eat. Okay, we'll put a little bit of avocado in there. And then a slice of egg. Grab one of those. Oh, that's a perfect length. Okay, so we're up to this stage now. You could give your fingers a little rinse if you like. Everyone with me so far? Let me know. Okay, now we employ all fingers instead of a sushi mat. So the trick here, and again, if your rice is too hot, this is going to be annoying, but you want to get your fingers underneath that edge so that you can lift it, and we're going to wrap and tuck, basically. So we just want to kind of pinch everything into the roll with our fingers. Keep everything nice and tight. So I'm actually applying quite a bit of squish and a bit of pressure onto the roll as I go, because we want to keep everything nice and tight. And then we're just going to roll it all in. You can go nice and slow, tuck the rice in if you need to. And make sure you squish on the ends as well so that they don't come out and fall apart everywhere. And we roll it up until we get that last little strip exposed. And this is where you're going to need your little bowl of water. We're going to give that a little moistening, kind of like a postage stamp, or at least the old-fashioned ones. And we finish the roll. And then bring that open seam up to the top so that you can do one last little stick down from the outside. Don't go too wet, and you can even dry it off after, but it's that little binding that is going to hold with the moisture from the water there. Okay, so we did lose a little bit out the edges, but the key now is to let this roll sit somewhere with the seam down so that it can fully stick. This is why I said you should have a plate ready for when it's ready, and I took up my space for other things, so I'm just going to stick it here. So seam down, we're going to let that sit, settle. Ideally that will chill a little bit before we actually cut it, because in the process of even waiting 20 minutes even would be more beneficial before you cut it, is that time the moisture from the rice is going to soften the seaweed paper and actually make it easier to cut so it doesn't rip and tear. So even letting it sit for 20 minutes, ideally, you know, it's a bit longer than that, but that would be ideal for the ease of cutting, basically. So we did lose a little bit of rice, that's all right, we can use it in the next one. I'm going to do one more for you, and then I will leave you to finish your remaining rolling, but I'm going to show you the mayonnaise as well. Okay, so the lines running in front of us, not too much rice. Going to go on there, and we can press it down a little bit. Just like so, making sure we get right out to the edges. If you need a smaller spoon to achieve this, that's absolutely a great idea to use. And really trying, again, not to overdo it on the rice. So even if there's little kind of holes that you can see through down to the bottom, that is okay. The order in which you build this does not matter so much. So I'm going to put the avocado down first. Maybe a little bit of egg. Look at that nice toasty, that's awesome, toasty crisp layer. Stick out those bits in the end. I'm going to cut one and show you just what I mean, how that effect comes to be. And with the extra ingredients that you have, I don't think I've ever made sushi and actually used them all up perfectly without having a sacrificial roll. Those ingredients, that's okay. It's absolutely fine to have extras. As a matter of fact, it's beneficial because there's so many other things you can do with them. So tomorrow morning, I would probably throw them into an omelet. You could even just do them as a quick little warmed bit in the pan over a salad. You could even just chop them up into a salad. So do not worry if you've got extra ingredients. Okay, technique again. We want to lift the outer edge so that we can tuck and roll, basically. So using pressure from your fingers. If you have any sharp bits that are going to stick out, we might need to get rid of them. So use pressure from your fingers. Squish that roll together. And just tuck and roll as you go. And the last little bit, we moisten down right to the edges. The edges are the hardest thing to stick, so go right to the edges, roll over that edge, bring it back to the top, and finish the stick down with a little bit more water, not too much. There we go. Okay? So I'm going to use the one that I rolled previously to show you the cutting process, because that is nearly as important to preventing any tearing. Now, if you were serving this in the lunchbox, chances are you're going to be cutting them into very small mouth, bite-sized pieces. And I would even recommend this as a habit anyways, because it's a lot more enjoyable to bite into a bite that you can properly move around your mouth rather than feel like you look like a chipmunk. So the key to cutting the sushi is going to be a sharp knife. Now, ironically, I have a Japanese knife. Absolutely love it. There's different methods for this, so I'm going to show you two ways. The way that I'm most comfortable and happy with is basically by cutting in between my fingers that are going to act as a guard to prevent the sushi from ripping on either side. This does, I guess, scare some people because they feel that the knife is near my fingers, which is true, but it's preventing any ripping from the front edge of the blade. So this is one method. there is another method that I can show you that you may want to try first. Okay, so the other method, depending on which way you're cutting, you're going to start with the open end, and you're going to cut in advance of your knife hand, so that the cutting edge that might spill apart, all the stuff that might want to squish out, you're actually protecting with your hand here. So then we go and we protect this little bit, and then you're going to prevent it from squishing out the other end because you're holding that end. In contrast, if you did it this way and you held your hand on the fat side or the long side, then you're pressing down here. If your knife is not sharp enough, this whole thing is going to rip and might squish out that side. So I hope you can see the difference there is you want to have your hand squishing the open end and cutting the end that leads into the rest of the sushi, just to prevent that little bit of extra squishing out. Okay, so there we have it, a beautiful brightly colored yellow sunshine sushi. And as far as the end bits go, this is why we stuck them out, is because when you put that on a plate, it actually looks quite nice having a little bit of flair and a little bit of decoration sticking out the end. So there we have our sunshine sushi.